What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Crack a Pack series. Today we are opening up a pack of 2010 core sets. This is not a core set that I actually opened a lot of during the time, but I know there are a lot of awesome cards in here, so I'm really excited to see what we get. We are going to go through this as if it's a pack one pick one scenario, so we'll figure out what our first round draft pick would actually be if we were drafting this set. Now, things to note, this is a core set, so on average the card quality or card power level is going to be a little bit lower than we would normally expect, so we'll try and keep that in account while we're going through this. So our first card here is Canyon Minotaur. It's a 3/3 for 3 and a red vanilla creature. Not super exciting, just a little bit underpowered at 3/3 for 4. We would expect at least maybe a keyword of some kind, maybe haste or trample or something like that on a card like this. And so 3/3 for 4, really just filler, not something that I'm super excited about at all. Giant Growth is a very classic instant for 1 green. Target creature gets +3/+3 until the end of the turn. So this is a very, very classic combat trick. It's very efficient, very cheap. Obviously, playing it at instant speed is super important. Giving +3/+3 for only 1 mana is great. So that is a huge power boost. This is definitely the kind of card that I would want in a green deck, just to be able to block something, maybe power this up. Or power the creature up with this Giant Growth, and then be able to kill something on the opponent's side of the field. That's exactly what you want to be doing. I would prefer to be in the color before taking this card, though. This is very much just a combat trick. It's not a reason to be in green, and so for that reason, I'm not super excited about first picking it. Illusionary Servant is a 3/4 for 1 and 2 blue. It does have flying, and when it becomes the target of a spell or ability, you sacrifice it. So this is actually a really pretty great card on the onset. So it's a 3/4 flyer for only 3. That is great. Absolutely fantastic. When it becomes the target of a spell or ability, however, you do have to sacrifice it. Now that means it could be any spell or ability. They could use a Giant Growth on your creature, and it just dies. That's obviously not ideal, but it does mean that they had to burn that combat trick or burn any kind of targeted card on this. And this is a really big threat as well, so it's a very early game threat, definitely one that they're going to have to deal with. I kind of like this card. Obviously, I do not like that second line of text there at all, but that does mean that they're going to burn a card on this, and because this is only a 3-drop, it's kind of okay if they do. You'd prefer one of your late game bombs to be able to seal away the game anyway. And so something like this is just used to either bait or present a threat that then they now have to find a way to deal with. And so for that reason, I actually kind of like it. Definitely out of the cards we have so far, this is the one that I'm most interested in. Vampire Aristocrat is a 2/2 for 2 and a black. You can sacrifice a creature, and it gets +2/+2 until the end of the turn. This is actually a very decent 3-drop, so sacrifice outlets are actually fairly good, especially if they are an established archetype in that set. I'm not 100% sure that they were in this set, to be honest, but usually black-red tends to be kind of a sacrifice theme. And so something like this is great because not only does it give you that sacrifice outlet, it also means that your opponent has to kind of second guess any kind of targeted removal or anything like that that you have or that they're going to use against you, because you can just sacrifice the creature in response and then pump this guy up. So all of a sudden this becomes a main target before they can really get to all of your other creatures. And I think that's really, really important. So being able to sacrifice stuff, play around some of the things that your opponent is doing, fantastic. Really, really love that. I think I still prefer the Servant. The Servant is much more of a threat on its own, and it still baits out those cards. And so for that reason, I'd rather have it, but the Aristocrat, definitely a strong pick. Rampant Growth is a sorcery for 1 and a green. Search your library for a basic land card and put that card onto the battlefield tapped. You then shuffle your library. Again, pretty classic card. We've seen this in a lot of sets. Being able to pull out any basic land for only 2 is pretty great because that does mean not only is it ramping you, but it's also fixing you. So if you're in a multicolor deck of some kind, which 90% of the time you will be in at least 2 colors, this is perfect, especially if you're going into the 3-4 color realm. You'll absolutely want Rampant Growth 100%. However, I would much rather, again, be established in that archetype before picking up a Rampant Growth, because a lot of times it's just a 2-mana ramp spell, which isn't bad, but it's not really all that impactful long term. I'd much rather have something like a creature, something that really poses a threat to the opponent. So for that reason, wouldn't want to first pick it, but definitely a good card. Siege Mastodon is a 3/5 for 4 and a white. Again, another vanilla creature here. Really don't like this one. These cards are classic traps because they stall the game, but don't actually gain you anything. And so the reason I say that is because it's just a 3/5 for 5. So while it's probably going to live for a little while, it's not dealing any damage, really. I mean, it's not dealing enough to make a huge difference, especially at 5 mana. And so for that reason, it's really not a big impactful card, not like you would maybe think it is if you're a newer player or something like that. This is just a bad card in my opinion. Absolutely do not take these. Very classic that we see usually once in a set or something, a white card in particular, have a really big butt and very little power, and it's usually a big, high costed card. They tend to all be pretty bad in my opinion, unless you have something like in the new sets, Ravnica Allegiance or something where you have High Alert where it deals damage equal to its toughness. Certainly in that case, they're much more favorable, but generally speaking, they're just pretty bad. Negate is an instant for 1 and a blue, counter target non-creature spell. The key thing here is that it is a non-creature spell. So while this is a very efficient counter spell, non-creature spells are much less rampant than creature spells when it comes to a limited format. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean that there will not be any, and you can certainly mainboard maybe one of these, but I would much rather have this be like Essence Scatter, which counters a creature spell. For that reason, I'm not as interested in the Negate as I would be in Essence Scatter, and so definitely not more than the Illusionary Servant for me, but not a terrible card. It's definitely a sideboard card for sure. If you find yourself up against more of a controlling style deck, more spells focused, you will absolutely want Negate, but a lot of the time it's not going to be as powerful as it would be in maybe a constructed format or something like that. Angel's Mercy is an instant for 2 and 2 white. Very simple card. You gain 7 life. Again, this is very much a trap for new players in my opinion. Gaining life is never a really consistent or powerful strategy when it comes to limited. You can gain all the life you want, but it really just stalls the game. It doesn't actually mean you're going to win the game. And so if all you're doing is playing a bunch of Angel's Mercies, gaining 7 life, gaining 7 life, gaining 7 life, that's fine. But how are you going to win the game? Because eventually they're still going to be able to take you down to 0 life, even if you gain 7 for like 3 or 4 turns in a row. It just doesn't matter. So not a big fan of cards like this. Absolutely not something that I would be interested in. Soul Bleed is an enchant creature for 2 and a black. At the beginning of the upkeep of the enchanted creature's controller, that player loses 1 life. This is actually a really interesting card. So this is something very similar to Stab Wound, which was in Return to Ravnica. Very powerful card. Definitely something that won games because it just consistently dealt damage to the opponent. And especially if it's towards the end of the game, they're probably going to be pretty low on life total anyway. So this sets a clock no matter what. They can destroy their own creature if they want, but obviously that's not ideal. And so I really like this card. I don't know if it's better than the Servant, but I'm going to keep it together with the Servant for now because it is genuinely powerful. Definitely a card that I really like. Yawning Fissure is a sorcery for 4 and a red. Each opponent sacrifices a land. This is very much not playable in limited. 90% of the time, everybody's going to be playing basics, in which case sacrificing a land does not really matter that much. The only time it would matter is if they are mana screwed, and in that case, you should be winning the game anyway. So for that reason, this card is just really bad, especially at 5 mana. If you're just drafting this, you're only going to be up against 1 player anyway. 5 mana, opponent chooses a land and gets rid of it. That's super bad, so not exciting at all. Demon's Horn is an artifact for 2 of any color. Whenever a player casts a black spell, you may gain 1 life. Now, there was a cycle of these for each color, and they actually do buffer your life total enough that they're kind of worth playing. Normally, life gain is not good, like I mentioned already, but when it's constant life gain and you get to play it early, it's pretty good. It's not like it's going to win you the game by any means, but it will keep you away from death a little bit quicker or a little bit better than just playing out, an average 2/2 for 2 or something like that, because it's going to save you a little bit more life, especially if you are in like a monocolor deck or something like that. All of that being said, I don't particularly like running cards like this. I'd still rather have something that gives a little more board presence, and so for that reason, not super stoked on that. Kajel Troll, I might be saying that wrong, I do apologize. It's a 4/3 for 2 and 2 green, and you can pay a green and regenerate it. That's actually really good. A 4-mana 4/3 is pretty much on point for what I would expect out of a core set. Being able to regenerate it just means that removal is not all that effective against it. So if you can play this and leave up a green mana, you're probably in pretty good shape and going to be able to keep it around for a while. Also, being a 4/3 means it's probably on par and going to be able to have a commanding board presence at least for a turn or two, and then hold its own maybe for the rest of the game. So I do like this. I don't honestly know if it's better than the other two. Probably better than the Servant, potentially better than the Bleed. I'm going to keep it all together for now, and we'll see. Flash Freeze is an instant for 1 and a blue, counter target red or green spell. So obviously this is a hard counter against red or green, which is great. Against every other color, it is a completely dead card. And so what that means is it is sideboard only. You do not run this main deck, but if you know you're going to be up against red or green cards or decks or anything like that, absolutely side this in. It's going to be perfect for your deck and super, super efficient. I don't want to make, I do not want to first pick a card like this. It's 100% sideboard, but it is very, very powerful. So if you happen to be in blue and there's not a better pick for your main board, this is an excellent, excellent sideboard option. And then our rare is Sunpetal Grove. So it's a land. It enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a forest or a plains, and then it taps for obviously green and white. Obviously, the lands you don't take early. If you are in green-white, this is going to be a card that you want, but in general, you do not take that early. So it does come down, unfortunately, to these three, which makes it a little bit tricky on me. I kind of like the Soul Bleed, personally. I know it's the least board impactful in terms of these actually are creatures. They're going to deal with the board a little bit better. And in this case, I think I would rather have the Troll just because this is so easily dealt with and this is so easily not dealt with. So for that reason, definitely going to get rid of the Servant. So it does come down between Soul Bleed and the Troll. My personal preference would be something like Soul Bleed just because that's my kind of style of playing. But I do think the correct pick is the Troll if I was just giving the best advice that I could possibly give. So I think that would be the pick I would take. Soul Bleed, definitely an interesting one though for sure. And the Servant, honestly, a really good evasive early threat. Really like it for that reason. So with that, if you liked this video, please make sure to leave a like or a comment down below. And as always, please make sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of our awesome content. But with that, I'm going to get out of here. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next Crack-A-Pack episode.